Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I was clearing out the back deck, sweating through the last of the August heat when I heard her car pull into the driveway. The timing surprised me. She wasn't due back until the next morning, but there she was, back early from her women's workshop in Sedona. My name is Logan Miles. I'm 38, a project engineer based in Fort Worth, and what I'm about to tell you started with a kiss on the cheek and ended with her turning our entire marriage into some kind of social experiment. She walked up the porch steps with this strange, floaty grin and oversized sunglasses still on, like she hadn't quite left the retreat behind. Her suitcase hit the floor with a thud. That place was illuminating, she said, like she'd just come down from a mountaintop with stone tablets under her arm. At first, I figured she was just refreshed. She looked lighter, talkative, animated. Told me about a breathwork circle that ended in a group cry, and how one of the instructors helped her untangle from internalized roles. I nodded through it, glad she seemed in a better headspace. That night, she lit candles around the bedroom and burned some weird resin that made my eyes water. Said we were recalibrating our sacred container. We didn't sleep together that night. She wanted to ground in her own energy. I gave her space. She'd just returned from a place where people wore robes and called each other goddesses. It made sense she needed a minute to transition. But by Wednesday, the shift was more than mood. She started throwing around new language. Words like sovereignty, energetic mismatch, and expansion. She told me she'd realized something powerful. Monogamy isn't always the highest path for emotional evolution. I looked up from my dinner and asked, what brought that on? She twirled her fork, then said, we've both limited ourselves to an old paradigm. You don't have to say anything now. Just feel into that. Feel into it. That weekend, I caught her sitting outside, FaceTiming some guy named Rail. He had a man bun, a nose ring, and a voice like he narrated sleep meditations. I stepped outside to grab the hose and saw her lean into the screen, whispering something that made her laugh. When I asked who he was, she said, a co-creator. We're building something deep. It's not romantic. Right. She started going out in the evenings, always saying she needed to connect with new energy. Sometimes she'd return late, humming to herself with her shoes in hand, acting like she'd just wandered in from a vision quest. Her phone never left her side anymore. It used to be left charging on the nightstand. Now it stayed locked, flipped screen down, always within arm's reach. I asked if there was something going on. She tilted her head like I was being naive. You're projecting old insecurities, she said. You don't own me, Logan. I'm a free being. I said, are we still in this marriage or are you somewhere else entirely? She smiled, actually smiled, and replied, we're in a transition. That's when things took a harder turn. One morning, she handed me an article titled Sacred Non-Monogamy in Long-Term Partnerships. It was a blog post about how true love isn't about exclusivity. It's about letting your partner run wild without judgment. I read it. All of it. Halfway through, it became clear that someone had convinced her commitment was oppression dressed up in a diamond ring. At dinner, she tested the waters. What if we didn't own each other's bodies? She asked while slicing into her roasted squash. I kept chewing. You mean we just stopped being married? No, she said. We upgraded. Radical honesty. Conscious freedom. Letting go of expectation. Sounds a lot like seeing other people, I replied. She tilted her head again. Maybe, if it's mutual. Except it wasn't mutual. She already had her plan. I was being brought into it last. That Friday night, she sat down across from me with a glass of wine and eyes full of decision. Her voice was calm, too calm. This is where I am, she said. I want to explore connections beyond just us. You're welcome to join me in that. But if you're not there yet, I understand. You can sleep in the guest room while I walk this path. I didn't say anything right away. My hands were on the table. I studied her face. She was serious and somehow proud of herself, like she'd just unlocked a secret level of enlightenment that I hadn't reached yet. And if I say no? I asked. Her smile didn't falter. Then you're choosing limitation. I won't stop expanding just because you're afraid. Something flickered inside me. It was detachment. She was speaking like I wasn't even part of the story anymore, just a piece of furniture reacting to her new direction. She leaned back, sipping her wine. This doesn't have to be painful. We can evolve consciously. or resist and suffer. I stared at her. Then I said what changed everything. How about I open the door and you get out? That smirk she'd been wearing, like she was 2 steps ahead in some spiritual chess game, faded immediately. For the first time in that entire conversation, her mask cracked. And that's when she realized I was done being polite about being disrespected. After I told her to get out, she sat there blinking, as if her brain hadn't quite caught up to her mouth. It was the first moment in weeks she didn't have a rehearsed answer ready. Her confidence cracked, just a little, but she quickly pieced it back together. "You're being reactive," she said. "That's the trauma speaking." I got up from the table and took my glass to the sink. I wasn't in the mood to argue with someone who treated our marriage like a TED Talk. From the living room, I could hear her pacing barefoot across the hardwood. She muttered phrases she probably picked up at that retreat, something about masculine resistance, inner child wounds, and old narratives. I tuned it out. The rest of the weekend followed a strange rhythm. She made no effort to leave, despite my words. In her mind, I was just processing, and eventually I'd come around. Sunday morning, she brewed coffee like nothing happened, played soft instrumental music, and wore that loose-knit shawl she always pulled out when she wanted to appear serene. But her eyes were scanning me constantly, waiting for signs of surrender. By midday, she asked if I was open to a heart-centered check-in. I told her I was heading to the gym. Later, I found her in the backyard on a video call with Rail. She spoke quietly, but I caught enough to know it wasn't just friendly. Her laugh had that soft lilt she used to save for me. When she noticed me watching from the kitchen window, she turned away slightly, her hand shielding her mouth like a teenager whispering secrets. That night, she approached with a printed diagram, circles labeled freedom, containment, and new contracts. She called it a relational map. She laid it out on the kitchen table like blueprints for a house I'd never agreed to build. "Monogamy is a social construct," she explained. "Love should evolve, not stagnate." I studied the page. "You already slept with him, didn't you?" She didn't deny it, just inhaled through her nose and answered like it was nothing more than a scheduling issue. We shared an experience that reflected back my true essence. That's all. The room fell quiet. The fridge hummed. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I looked at her face and saw exactly what had changed. She had rewritten the rules, mid-game, then expected applause for her courage. That night, she texted Rail while curled up on the opposite end of the couch. I watched her screen light up and dim over and over again. She made no effort to hide it. In her mind, this was liberation. If I pushed back, I'd be labeled insecure or small-minded. So I said nothing. Just got up, grabbed a throw blanket, and sat in the armchair instead. Her eyes followed me, but she didn't speak. The next day, she hosted a conscious connection call in our home office. I walked past the door and heard her introducing herself to the group. "I'm in transition," she said. "My husband's still catching up energetically." There was a soft round of laughter. That evening, she handed me a list. "This is what I need during this chapter," she said. It was written like a set of roommate boundaries, do's and don'ts for cohabitating with energetic spaciousness. Line items included things like respecting private time with chosen partners and suspending expectations of emotional labor. I handed it back without reading more than a few lines. "I'm not a participant in this performance," I told her. She folded the paper slowly, like she was dealing with a child refusing to share crayons. The pressure kept building, subtle but constant. She flooded the house with incense and neutral-toned cushions, removed photos from our walls, anything that depicted stagnant energy from outdated phases. She replaced our wedding portrait with abstract art, claimed it was more reflective of our current dynamic. Every action was a provocation, packaged in calm language. She carved into our marriage one ritual at a time. Thursday, she posted a photo on Instagram, her sitting on a picnic blanket with Rail under an oak tree. Caption read, "Exploring new pathways with aligned souls." Comments poured in. Her friends cheered her bravery. I recognized a few names. Some of them had been at our wedding. That night, she sauntered in from whatever ceremony they'd attended, barefoot, humming. She smelled like sage and red wine. I was watching the news. She leaned over the back of the couch, resting her chin near my shoulder. "You're resisting growth," she whispered. "But resistance is just fear in costume." I turned off the TV. "You done with your exploration for the night?" She smiled, slow and condescending. He's helping me open in ways I never imagined. That was her dare. That was the moment she wanted me to snap, yell, throw something, beg her to stop. Instead, I stood up, walked past her, and locked myself in the guest room with my laptop. She stood on the other side of the door for a few seconds, waiting to see if I'd come back out. I didn't. She spent the weekend bragging to her spiritual friends about how I couldn't handle her authenticity. But that wasn't true. I was disgusted by her manipulation dressed up in enlightenment. By Sunday, the tone changed. I started getting messages from her circle, passive-aggressive check-ins. Comments like, "Logan, we see you. Growth is hard, but beautiful." I didn't answer any of them, because I'd already begun the process of removing myself from her theater. And the last thing she expected was silence. She thought resistance meant argument. She never anticipated stillness. She couldn't see that my silence wasn't compliance. It was strategy. She thought she was leading this dance. But I was already on my way out of the building. The guest room became my sanctuary. For 3 days, I worked from that small desk beside the window, answering emails, finishing proposals, and reviewing field reports. I left early in the mornings, returned late in the evenings. If she spoke to me, I kept responses brief and neutral. She thought I was sulking. She misread my silence as hesitation. What I was actually doing, methodically, deliberately, was preparing for my exit. Tuesday morning, I woke up before the sun and opened the private account I'd established 3 years ago during a previous contract in Houston. I hadn't touched it since, but it sat there, fully intact. The emergency fund I hoped I'd never need was now my runway. I began pulling essential documents into a manila folder: passport, birth certificate, insurance policies. Everything I didn't want buried in her intentional clutter release, which was her new term for randomly throwing out items that held the vibration of the past. By noon, I'd visited a coworker I trusted, one of the few people who never asked invasive questions. I handed him a spare key, told him to keep it safe. No context, just a favor from one man to another. Back at the house, she was rearranging the living room furniture according to some chart she'd printed. "Feng shui for intimate liberation," she said. She asked if I could move the couch. I told her I had a meeting in 10. She raised an eyebrow, then made a show of pushing it herself. That night, she brought home Thai food. My favorite. She set it on the table, candles lit, music humming from her playlist, the same one we used during date nights, back when we still had those. "This doesn't have to be war," she said, placing a bowl in front of me. I stayed standing. "You crossed a line," I said. Her expression flickered, brief, but visible. Still, she recovered quickly, playing the calm card like she always did. "You're confusing boundaries with betrayal. I've simply evolved. You're welcome to meet me there." I looked at the dinner she laid out like a peace offering. Then I walked upstairs. Wednesday, I cleared my tools from the garage. One by one, I packed them into the trunk. Each socket, each drill bit, each item I'd purchased with weekend labor and early morning runs to the hardware store. She asked where I was going. I said, to rebuild. The phrase landed, but she chose not to ask more. I spent that night at a hotel 20 minutes from the house. Checked in under an alias I'd used once during a consulting job in Dallas. Slept soundly for the first time in weeks. By Thursday, I'd secured a rental on the east side. Quiet block, older property, but solid bones. 1 bedroom, small backyard, perfect for resetting. I signed a 6-month lease, dropped the deposit, and arranged for a moving truck. Not much to take, really. Just the essentials. At noon, I returned to the house one last time. She was on the back patio, talking to Rail on speaker. They were planning some sort of solstice ritual. I stepped into the foyer, collected the folder from the drawer, and grabbed my last duffel. She saw me from across the kitchen. Her voice caught mid-sentence. Rail was still talking, unaware she'd gone still. "Where are you headed?" she asked. I zipped the bag. Out. Out where?" I shrugged. "Somewhere that honors commitment." She laughed, sharp and uncertain. "So you're just leaving?" I nodded. "Exactly that." Her mouth opened, but no sound followed. She tried to read my face. For once, she saw nothing left to decode. This was the end of the conversation she'd been dancing around since the retreat. I stepped past her, just stood there barefoot, wearing the same flowing wrap she used for yoga. At the door, I paused. "Keep the candles. They're yours. So is Rail. So is the freedom you wanted." And then I walked out. The heat hit me the moment I crossed the threshold. but it felt cleaner than anything inside that house. I started the car, checked the mirrors, and drove. By sunset, I was standing in my new place, watching light spill across blank walls. I didn't answer the 3 missed calls that showed up by midnight. I didn't respond to the message that said, "This is cruel," because it wasn't. Cruelty is pretending a marriage exists while inviting strangers into your bed. Cruelty is calling betrayal a journey and daring the other person to applaud. I gave her what she claimed to need, distance. But I gave myself something far more valuable, departure. The silence must have unnerved her. By the second morning after I walked out, she sent a voice memo, something vague about holding space for repair if I'm ever ready. I deleted it before it finished playing. She'd built an altar for self-discovery, convinced she could burn the house down and invite me to meditate in the ashes. I spent that weekend assembling furniture in the new place. The kind that comes in flat boxes, where each piece clicks into the next if you pay attention. There's something therapeutic about order. Tight screws, clean lines, sharp corners. Everything fits because it's designed that way, unlike a marriage held together by contradictions and smirks. Monday came. Another message. This one was longer. "I'm not angry," she said. "Just curious why you vanished instead of processing things like adults." The irony made me laugh. That same evening, a friend of hers, one I'd always considered grounded, messaged me out of nowhere. "Hey Logan, I know this is strange, but are you okay?" I responded with 2 words, "Absolutely thriving." 3 minutes later, a screenshot arrived. It was my ex's Instagram story. She'd posted an old photo of us from 3 years ago with the caption, "Letting go of what limits you isn't abandonment, it's alignment." The narrative shift had begun. She'd always known how to shape perception. Now she was leaning hard into the idea that she was the enlightened one who outgrew the small-town husband unwilling to evolve. Problem was, her story required silence from me. That part she hadn't planned for. The next day, her younger cousin, an art student who once crashed on our couch for 2 months, shared a cryptic tweet. "Some people mistake loyalty for control. Healing means walking away from that." Another piece of her campaign, clearly coordinated. Except here's where things slipped. Rail posted a photo, shirtless, holding a smoothie, tagged in Tulum with a different woman. Different caption too. "Sacred chemistry is rare. Grateful for this deep reflection." I bookmarked it, said nothing. 2 days later, her story disappeared. So did the vague quotes. Instead, her profile went private. One of our mutual friends texted, "Thought you should see this." Attached was a screenshot of a group chat, several of her friends reacting to Rail's post. Comments ranged from "Wait, I thought he was with Lily," to "Yikes. This is messy." The same voices who cheered her transformation were now falling silent. That support she'd expected to carry her forward was slipping. People who once liked every post were nowhere to be found. She sent another message that evening. "This transition hasn't been easy. I hope you know I didn't mean to hurt you. I still care." A week passed. Then came the knock. I opened the door. She stood there in jeans and a plain hoodie, stripped of all that ceremonial glamour. "I needed to see where you landed," she said. I stepped aside, let her look around. The place was clean, minimal, not a trace of shared history in sight. She scanned the space like someone looking for proof that they'd been erased. "I expected you'd be," she started, then trailed off. I waited. "Angry," she finally said. "Or devastated?" "I made a choice," I replied. "Same as you." She bit her lip, unsure where to go next. For once, she looked uncomfortable in her own skin. "I thought freedom would feel lighter," she whispered. "But it's heavier without context." I tilted my head. "You mean without consequences?" She took a step back. "I don't regret seeking something deeper," she said. "You just regret losing the fallback." She didn't deny it. "I never wanted to lose your respect. You didn't lose it. You gave it away." For a moment, she looked like she might cry. But no tears came. Maybe she used them all up convincing herself she was the victim of confinement. "Do you think we'll ever talk again?" she asked. "Maybe. As people. But not as partners." Her face collapsed, just slightly. Enough to show the cracks forming in whatever story she'd been telling herself. She lingered in the doorway like she was hoping for an invitation to step back inside. I didn't move. Eventually, she turned and walked away. I watched her get into her car. The same one I'd made payments on for 4 years. The same car that drove her to sacred experiences while I carried the mortgage. The engine started. She pulled away without looking back. And just like that, her safety net unraveled, one thread at a time. 3 weeks passed without a word. I kept busy, long hours on site, lifting more than I had in years. There's a clarity that comes from physical exhaustion. By the time I'd return home, all I wanted was cold water, silence, and my own space. The kind where every object had a place and every room felt like mine again. One night after work, I stopped by a small local shop and picked up a secondhand bookshelf. Carried it inside piece by piece, placed it near the front window. I started refilling it slowly, some old manuals, a few hardcovers from college, a framed photo of my late grandfather. Nothing performative, just honest things I chose. I hadn't blocked her. She still had a number that worked. She just stopped trying. And that absence was louder than anything she'd said during those last conversations. It was a Wednesday when the message arrived. I know it's been a while. I've been thinking. Can we talk? Just those 2 lines. The tone was uncertain, like someone testing a lock they once had a key for. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over it. Then I turned it off, set it face down, and went back to sanding the side table I'd been refinishing. By then, I'd already sold the house. Quietly, efficiently, with a private broker who understood the need for discretion. She hadn't signed the final paperwork. That happened by default when she missed the 3rd legal notice. I'd waited the full term, followed procedure, mailed the documents twice. There was nothing sneaky about it. 2 days later, her old friend Mandy texted. We hadn't spoken since the wedding. She asked how I was doing. I told her the truth, learning the value of my own peace. She responded with a single sentence. Just so you know, most of us figured it out. A week after that, someone tagged me in a post from our old neighborhood. It was a community fundraiser. Photos of families, kids with balloons, neighbors holding trays of baked goods. She was there, standing alone near the edge of the frame, arms crossed, expression guarded. I stared at the image for a moment. Then I closed the app. Later that night, I received another message from her. I miss your steadiness. The house feels empty. Everything echoes. I read it twice, then deleted it. She didn't lose me overnight. This wasn't a story of one bad decision. It was erosion, small dismissals, smug superiority, whispered comparisons, and worst of all, the quiet certainty that I'd never leave. She had gambled everything on the idea that I'd tolerate endless ambiguity, that I'd nod along to her evolution while she rewrote the rules in real time. What she never calculated was that a man raised on principles, who builds things with his hands, who honors what he signs, doesn't stay where respect vanishes. He moves. And I had. A few weeks later, my new place felt like home. A friend helped me haul in a couch. I found myself sleeping deeper, laughing more, planning weekends again. One Friday night, I ran into someone familiar at a nearby diner. A woman who used to serve us coffee back when we were still pretending our marriage had heartbeat. She gave me a smile and asked how things were going. We talked. Just talked. Easy, natural. She didn't speak in riddles or accuse me of spiritual ignorance. She didn't suggest opening anything. I walked her to her car. No big moment. Just a quiet wave and the promise of breakfast next week. The next morning, another message came in. Do you think there's a version of us that still works? I stared at it for a full minute. Then I archived the thread permanently. Some doors don't get closed, they get sealed. She had made her choices, dressed them in empowerment, and expected applause. What she got was distance. And that distance taught her what intimacy really means. Who stands by you when everything goes still. I'd once loved her deeply. But love means nothing without respect. And once that's gone, there's nothing left to rebuild.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.